Hello and welcome again to another episode of SacTown Talks. Today we're glad to be joined by a special guest, Catharine Baker, former assembly member and director of the UC Student and Policy Center. Catharine, thanks for joining us.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you in person and not just hear your voice.
I know.
So great. I'm starstruck. Nice to be here.
Yeah. So, we were talking a little bit off camera kind of about your past, but I guess kind of for your listeners, can we kind of hear a little bit about you and kind of whatever led you to run for assembly?
Sure. So, I'm a native Californian, born and raised down in the desert area of Coachella Valley before Coachella was a music festival.
Yeah.
And did my undergrad in Chicago and then worked in public affairs there, cut my teeth on politics in Chicago, which is not a bad place to do that. Then I was...
what years were these?
Now you're going to date me. So early 90s, graduated from college, worked until mid 90s in Chicago. Then I went to work on Capitol Hill for the congressman from my hometown, Sonny Bono, for several years. And then came back to California, as often happens when you've gone away for a while, went to Cal for law school, go Bears, and clerked for a federal judge, then went to work at Big Law for several years, and then at a mid-sized law firm, and then got involved in politics more directly, probably by two big events that happened in my life. The first was the Great Recession, which I know seems like a long time ago. Hopefully we're not going to see something like that again, but I had seen every family that we knew, including my own, somebody, either one or both parents was laid off. We had young kids, and I was very frustrated with how the national level was dealing with it. Actually kept me up at night, and thought I was totally powerless to do anything about it. I didn't think the federal administration or Congress were dealing with the problem well, saw the impact it was having on my community. So I got up the next morning after staying up all night thinking about it one night and volunteered for a congressional campaign of what can I do to help? That member lost.
Which campaign was it?
That was David Harmer in the East Bay, very close congressional district race. Back in 2010, I think he lost by 1 percentage point or something like that. It was one of those races that was going to flip either way. It was over on either the night before Thanksgiving or a couple of days before. But he lost. I learned a lot about campaigns. Like, that was a targeted campaign. So
you were like a partner in a law firm.
Yep. I wasn't a partner. I was a cog, an associate.
A cog, yeah. Okay. And what kind of law were you doing?
So at that point, I was doing general commercial litigation, working at Morrison and Forrester, MoFo. My email address was mofo.com, which is pretty fun. And then after that experience, I thought, I don't need to go into San Francisco to work at a great law firm. And I joined a firm in the East Bay. It's been there for over 30 years. Not a free plug, but Hoag Fenton. And they've been in Silicon Valley for over 75 years. Great mid-sized firm, been working on that. Primarily, I did work in nonprofit board governance and entity formation for smaller businesses. So that was a lot of what I did. Well, then 2012, I decided I was going to try again to help somebody else get elected.
In your free time?
In my free time.
So you're a mom.
As a mom of twins
an attorney.
And working as an attorney. I was working part-time and mom full-time. I volunteered on the Mitt Romney campaign and started as a county chair and became the Bay Area regional chair for the Romney campaign. Got to go to the RNC convention. And
where was it?
That was in Tampa in August, right after a hurricane.
Yeah.
And of course, I really believed in him as a candidate. I'm also still a great admirer, but he lost. So at that point in 2013, the second big event, so there was a Great Recession, I got to get involved in helping other people get elected. The event that happened for me that said, you got to run yourself was our schools, our local schools. I was very active in our schools. I was on every committee you can have. I had all the cookie dough in my freezer and gift wrap and everything. And I was seeing some real problems in the classroom. I was seeing problems with principals, seeing problems with funding. If we could get just one more reading resource person to help this particular child get to third grade reading level, but we couldn't do it because we were spending money on something else. It was frustrating. And so I went to the principal, and I remember the conversation outside a classroom. I said, what committee have you not put me on yet that fixes these problems I'm seeing in our school? Because it's driving me crazy. It's affecting my family. And he said, there isn't one. And there's not really anything you can do about it, which is a great thing to tell a mom when you think there's a problem.
Right.
I said, what do? Do I run for school board? He said, no, most of what you're concerned about is coming from the state. It's not the national level. It's not locally. School boards can't do as much about it. There were state policies that bugged me and I thought were having a bad impact or could be better for our teachers, for our kids. And so I ran for state assembly in 2014. Joan Buchanan was terming out, and I ran and won in 2014. It was the most expensive assembly race in the state of California in state history at that point.
And how much was that?
And it won. So, well, I think the other candidates spent over, I think, $3 or $4 million at the time, might have even been higher. I raised $780,000. There was a lot of IE involvement, of course, going on. I ran against someone with whom I work closely on policy issues. Good guy. Tim Sabranti was head of the CTA's political action committee for the
so it became like this big spend on education, right? Teachers versus charter schools.
Very much so. And also people forget that Steve Glazer, who became a great, great friend and legislative partner when I was in the legislature and beyond, he and I ran against each other in that race. So we were opponents before we were colleagues working together. So that's how I came to originally run for assembly and just get in politics to begin with it all.
And so how was it going from, you were still a mom. I'm sure you're still super involved
still a mom, yes.
in the school.
Yeah.
Probably had to take a little break from law.
Yeah.
To come to the assembly. Like what was that like?
Oh, it was great. It was great work to do. I hadn't come up as someone who's run for several different offices. It's my first time running. I hadn't served in local government. A lot of great members.
What did it feel like to win?
Oh, it feels absolutely wonderful to win. Yeah. It feels wonderful to win re-election as well. It's extremely humbling when someone comes up to you in the community and says, I voted for you. That means this person, of all their choices, not only cast a vote, which is an honor in the first place to make sure people vote, but they chose you. They made a decision to choose you. Super, super humbling, and it bears a great responsibility. And I'm sure many people in the building feel that way. That's exactly how I felt. And also, how much can I possibly accomplish in the time that I have? And just put my every energy and whatever talents I have, everything went into serving that district. And I loved it. It was great work to get to do. It was exhausting because I was also the number one target.
Well, yeah, because your district was like, it wasn't even like purple. What would you say?
No, I think when I first was elected in 2014, it was purple getting very close to a light shade of blue. I think the Democratic registration advantage had been about 8%. And then that was in 2014. By 2016, it was about 13%. And by 2018, it was close, if I remember correctly, at about 14%. That's not considered a
So here's something that's interesting. We've seen members win seats they weren't supposed to win. It was a fluke, right?
Yeah.
And they knew they were on borrowed time. And you see them switch parties. Maybe you were there during something like this happened. Brian Mainshine switched parties, right?
In the 2018 elections,
yeah. I guess you were faced with that choice as well.
I did. Actually, I was faced. So a couple things. The first is when I arrived, I didn't really have, it's going to sound so naive, nothing surprises me in politics. I didn't really have quite the concept of target, and you're on borrowed time. In the early days, like 3 days after I got elected, a local paper interviewed me and they said, their headline was, "What's it like to have a target on your back?" Well, I'm just like any other member. I'm going to go there and work hard and do everything I can for the good of this community. And then I remember a member came up to me, Bay Area member is no longer there, walked all the way across the floor and said, "Oh man, I don't envy you." I'm like, "Why? This is a great honor. We get to do good things here." He says, "You're going to have to work so hard. And everything you do is going to be under a microscope and used against you. Every single move you make, anything you attend and everything else." I said, I worked hard to get here. I kind of joked it off a little bit. But thank you. But that really stuck with me. That's when I realized there's this whole other infrastructure in the building. Democrat and Republican in California, at the national level, everywhere. Your goal, the underlying goal, is to take out the other side's targets and on your team protect. And that was the new part for me. Going back to a prior question you asked, what was it like? That was the new part. And I think I overcome it well because I was just focused on, I wanted to get things done. I did not want to try to score a bill that had no meaningful impact because it was going to check a box that you passed a bill. I really wanted to get things done, and I was proud of that. I think I came away with the most bipartisan record, depending on one or two members, and a lot done.
Well, as you kind of said, it is a team game, right? It's a war over there, and so they don't like Republicans passing bills, right?
Well, they put the obstacles. And by the way,
they'll steal your bill, right? They'll just take your idea.
Well, there's a highest degree of honor when that happens. That happened a couple of times for me. But I will say, this isn't a partisan statement I'm making. This is what any legislature does. I think in a another legislature somewhere else in the state that's heavily Republican, they're going to do the same thing. But that's what asked that question. And then in 2016, when I outperformed Donald Trump by almost 40% in the district and won by 11 or 12 percentage points. To me, the question was, gee, do I change parties? It was, I'm getting feedback from my constituency, you're doing the right thing. As I want you to work across the aisle, take any good idea that comes your way and fight for it. And don't really care who's it from, and focus less on the partisanship. You're doing what I want you to do. So that when I was in office, changing parties really wasn't front of mind. And the main thing is, how do I continue that service?
Well, it's kind of like, you were just kind of like the model of what is good and right in politics. And it's like kind of like the Catharine Baker, like, why isn't the Republican Party all like Catharine?
Well,
Catharine Baker?
I don't know about that.
Why hasn't Catharine Baker just run the party? And you kind of see where it's gone since then, right?
Very different. Yeah, very different party.
A lot of people
who
were Republicans in 2018 are no longer Republicans.
That's right. You can see that. I see there's a registration uptick happening in the last few cycles in California, but you see that for sure. You see, when I was first elected in 2014, we had 28 members of the Republican caucus. After 2016, it went down to 25. I think they have 18 now. That's just in the assembly.
Right.
And so the country and the parties, both parties are going through tremendous change and priorities. And presidential elections kind of concentrate the focus of that for sure. But it's certainly was happening in my time in the legislature and definitely since.
Yeah. And so your election in 2018, kind of what do you attribute to like what happened? You came off an 11-point, win. Things were good.
Yeah. I think I won the primary by 17 points.
Yeah.
Not a surprise to me. It came from, well, first of all, I think what happened was, and this is not to blame somebody else for how you ran your campaign. I'm sure there's ways I could have run it better. My opponent ran a great campaign, serves the district well now. And what really happened is there was a national debate. Do you like Donald Trump or not? And at every single day, I spent all day answering questions about Donald Trump. And in the end, I still received a huge bipartisan support from the electorate. I think 32% of the people who voted for me were not Republican. It was a very bipartisan result. That's how the race was as close as it was in a very high turnout race. But the number one question I got from people was Donald Trump constantly. And I don't even think they may have known my name ID. They probably didn't know my opponent's name ID at the time because this was a first-time candidate herself. But that was absolutely the case. I had Republican women, not the activists, but Republican women come up to me and say, I think you're doing a great job. Love the job you're doing. Can't vote for you because of Donald Trump. I had Democrats come up to me and say that as well. And that's where our country really is right now, is that we are very, very tied to, I cannot cross the aisle. It is the hardest thing in the world to do. And that is a style of leadership that I have. If it's in vogue at different times, great. It's not right now because I think it's really, we're very much partisan aligned.
Yeah.
And of course, folks who don't like one candidate on the side or the others, but we have to be. This is existential. So that's what I know happened in 2018 was we like the job you're doing at high favorability rates, feedback from the constituents, but I cannot vote for you because you have an R after your name, and I feel like I'm voting for Donald Trump. Who knows what would have happened if he'd been on the ballot? They could have voted no for him and yes for me, but
because that worked in 2016, but I guess and once he took office, there was like this
different, very different.
Having Rebecca Bauer-Kahn on, that's really what propelled her to run, right?
Yeah.
A lot of
and
people
run successfully since then. So absolutely, with very wide margins of winning in that district. And I will say, it's despite in my time in the assembly as an elected Republican, I said this earlier, I'll plant my flag on this. I think I was the most consistently vocal about Donald Trump as a Republican when I was in office and had the most to lose. That's very hard for people to survive an election. Look at what's happened to the people who've been critical of him. They're out of the party. So, but that's the national level. I've got other things going on in my life right now.
So 2018, you leave office. Kind of what do you do?
Yeah. Well, I was very happy to go back to my law firm where the firm had a great commitment to community service, community program, a lot of pro bono work, and I got to be a part of leading that effort. How were we going to do events and education that was beneficial to the community? Worked on a lot of nonprofits that I cared about, California Forward, California Women Lead, the Livermore Lab Foundation works with one of our national labs on climate policy. And then I had an opportunity to serve on the Fair Political Practice Commission. So then State Controller Betty E. it was her slot to appoint someone, and I was grateful that she appointed me to that. And I'm now coming to the end of my 4-year term. I started that job in late 2020, early 2021, and my term ends in January.
Yeah. So kind of, we were talking earlier about your, 2014 race. It was one of the most expensive ever.
Yeah.
Tons of IE money. Kind of having that experience, as a candidate and kind of having to deal with the filings and stuff going around you. Just trying to see
and it's a first-time
who's spending
candidate.
against you, all that.
Yeah.
And then now being a commissioner, kind of how has that kind of shaped kind of your work on the FPPC?
It's very beneficial to have, I think, voices of people who've been on the regulated side who come with the mindset, look, I'm looking to run for office. And then once in office, I'm looking to comply with all the other rules, conflict of interest, behest payments. I want to comply with the rules and how difficult it is because they're very complex. And to bring that perspective to the work that the professional staff is doing there, I think it's very valuable. Our outgoing chair was a practitioner as well. He was counsel to many candidates and ballot measures so that you can kind of have that perspective. Right. But we also have commissioners who come from academia and teach in government transparency and government ethics. We have Dotson Wilson, Commissioner Wilson, of course, was very widely respected for his work as clerk and chief in the assembly. And I've got good colleagues on the commission that bring different viewpoints, but having the viewpoint of someone who's had to comply with the rules and found it difficult. I never had, I had 2 audits that happened to me just through the random draw. Both of them were completely clean and clear. So that's always good to point out. But that's part of the work. And I think it brought a real reform perspective to the FPPC, an entity that this year is celebrating its 50th year as a commission that plays a critical role in transparency in our democracy.
Wow, it's been 50 years since 1974.
Yes, I know.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wouldn't know anything about the early 70s, of course. But, celebrating really a landmark law that other states followed. And we often lead the way on transparency in elections and who's trying to influence your vote and conflict of interest rules. But trying to reform an agency that was really bogged down and behind in the work that it was doing and making it difficult for people to follow the rules and for people to have faith. And I'm very proud that in the 3.5 years I've been in the commission, we've dramatically changed that, the time frame by which the staff gets things done. We put deadlines on our own staff for the first time, I think, in the commission's entire history. I'd love to see that done at the DMV and maybe EDD, but did that as a team with the staff there instead of just combative and imposing something unrealistic. So I'm sure there's areas of growth and strength the FPPC can continue to work on, but I'm very proud of getting to do that work. It's also been, I wouldn't say a detox because that sounds too negative. It was a great place for me to go next to work on democracy and elections and transparency and accountability of government without the politics that you get from running for office and being a target. What party are you on? So for 4 years, I haven't been able to contribute to any campaign, endorse any candidates, or be involved. And that's been a nice, healthy aspect to life.
Yeah. Too. Gosh, how can we all get appointed?
Yes, but you also have to liquidate all of your campaign assets. So if you happen to have any leftover funds. But yes, that would be a way in which to go to colleagues and say, I'm sorry, I can't help you in this campaign.
So it's fascinating. I'm just at the grocery store and I hear the butchers talking about campaign finance and Citizens United and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, wow, here you go. You're just like listening to just 2 blue collar guys just talking about money and politics, how it's all rigged, da, da, da.
Well, good for them. And because they care. And there is this, it's rigged. Of course, that's been the dialogue for several years now.
You even had like Chris Cuomo last night in the DNC pointing out how much money was in the rafters there.
Makes it all the more important that you have the maximum transparency and you make it easy for people to comply with the rules and that the people can know who is trying to influence their vote. It's clear to them who it is, and they can have that when they go to cast a ballot.
So like, as we said, this law was put in 1974. A lot of it hasn't been touched. Well,
there's been some initiative amendments that have happened since then, and we've done a fair amount of regulation. So I think in the early 2000, there was a major overhaul, possibly 2010, a couple of propositions on campaign contribution limits and what committees can be used for and what they can't. But yes, it's still the bedrock is still there.
Yeah, and I always love talking to members because they're always like, there should be no contribution limits. There should just be 24-hour reporting.
Yeah. Well, there's they'll say there should be no contribution limits. There's a great case to be made for that. You report it, it's clear and where it's at. But on the other hand, there's folks right now really advocating there may be a bill, I don't know if it's still alive, to make it public financed and no private funding of campaigns and a little bit of everything in between. So, yeah.
Yeah. So in your experience and kind of you're reading about it and looking around, kind of what do you think good solutions are kind of going forward for campaign finance in California?
Well, one of the first and foremost is that the rules are consistently applied, that candidates and the public and government officials, once they're in office, know how to comply so that you're avoiding violations to begin with. You're not going down a path either inadvertently or intentionally where you're misusing funds or you're not providing that transparency to voters on where the money's coming from and how you're spending it. That's important, people to just comply. How do you get any justice if you don't have rules that are clear and explainable? I think one of the advances, in addition to our own reforms on campaign finance and our own time frame, is behest payments and making sure that the reporting is meaningful and clear. Of course, we know, because we talk in this lingo, what behest payments are. That's when an elected official asks somebody to give to a nonprofit. We instituted rules that you have to start disclosing if you are connected with that nonprofit, if you control that nonprofit, if your spouse gets a 6-figure salary from that nonprofit. It's providing that information so people then can be more informed about their voice. I think that's been an important reform, and we can continue on that. And I think, honestly, there's a pretty big measure that is happening now. Steve Glazer forwarded it a couple of years ago, and that is pay to play. And that is having limitations on what contributions you can make to someone at the local level before they vote on something that affects you directly while you have, say, a development application before them. I think that's been a terrific advancement in transparency. It's very hard to comply with, and there's some bills in the legislature right now that might amend that. I'm not going to comment on those. But I think those are areas, making sure candidates can comply, getting behest payment and the types of transparency about those out there is a terrific improvement. And then how do we make sure we're watching for corruption?
Yeah. So, here we are in the final weeks of the legislature. We just had the Appropriations Day, where all the bills are cold.
Black Thursday.
What was it like for you being a Republican member on Black Thursday? Waiting in suspense for what's going to come out.
Well, love the term of in suspense. That was very, very well done. I had bills come out of suspense, and of course the ones that you feel passionately about that didn't was always difficult to see. I was there at a different time in terms of finance. We were in more of a more balanced budget situation, less of a deficit than what the state's been confronting now. So most of the members over there, this is their first time having to deal with that. I was pleased to have bills make it out of the assembly. This is when Lorena Gonzalez was chair. And of course, as the number one target that Speaker Rendon had identified publicly, this is the person we want to take out. Every cycle, I had bills make it out of suspense. But I had some ones I really cared a lot about that I'm not entirely sure how they ended up on suspense, because you don't see the fiscal impact, not make it out. Those are the politics. Also happens to Democratic members. But as a Republican member, I was pleased to get some out. I had 16 bills just with my name on them in the 4 years that I was there, make it out and onto the floor and get passed.
Are there any bills you remember that did not get through that no one else has picked up and become law? That is just a bill idea that you're like, man, like this needs to be done and it hasn't.
There have been a couple that I wish that if someone wants to take that on. One, it'll sound a bit esoteric, but it's called vertical prosecution for human trafficking cases. So vertical prosecution is when you are prosecuting a case, typically a DA has responsibility for the early part of the case, and then you got a DA for the second part, the third, the fourth. So the victim is having to work with a different person at each stage of the prosecution. And if you're a victim of human trafficking, having to relive the experience again and again with someone really made it a barrier to prosecution of the people doing the harm. Vertical prosecution was something that was innovated by one or two DAs, one from the Bay Area. You have the same person you work with through the entire process. And this is for child trafficking as well as all human trafficking that can happen. And just makes it so much easier for the victim to, in their experience, it's much more compassionate and much easier to prosecute the cases and bring the wrongdoers to justice. Those bills made it out of committee. They made it out of suspense. The Legislative Women's Caucus made it one of their priority bills my last year, but didn't get it onto the floor. And that would be one I'd love to see. It's not at the front headlines, I realize, but for child trafficking and human trafficking, that's one of the ways we can be more compassionate to the victims and get the wrongdoers more fully prosecuted. Not as sexy as some issues, but that's one for sure that I'd love to see someone take on.
That's interesting. So, 2018, you're out, you went back to law, you're doing the FPPC. Kind of what are you doing now?
So I have an awesome and amazing job that I've had for now about 6 weeks. I'm the new director, the inaugural director at the UC Student Policy Center here in Sacramento. It's around the corner, beautiful glass building that is right on 11th between L and K. And this is a new presence for the university in Sacramento. It's a new initiative for a new relationship with policymakers in the legislature. And so I get to direct this effort. I guess I would explain what it is and what the role is, I'd probably give you two metaphors. This center is meant to be the front door between the university and the policymaking community, the legislature, the governor's office, state leaders, and everyone
all
around.
UCs.
All UCs.
Okay.
And all 10 wonderful UC campuses. And to have a front door that they come into the building and we can engage and share with them the research and expertise that UC has on so many issues. The University of California has a presence in every single state, every single county in the state, all 58. In every legislative district, every congressional district, they have a presence beyond the 10 campuses alone. And they have faculty and research and expertise in every aspect of modern life. I just was thumbing through UC Berkeley, for example, and all their institutes. There are over 24 institutes: transportation, healthcare, labor, energy, the environment, climate, young workforce, extreme health, extreme heat, food safety. And the university has so much to offer that front door they want to have open, where you can come in and access that research and information, but also where the university gets out and goes into the building and shares that with policymakers. So the front door is what the center's meant to be. The other metaphor I try to use to describe what I will be doing is the public square. The center is meant to be a place of convening leaders and voices from across the state on challenging issues that are front of mind, where we can have a great conversation, hopefully identify some great solutions, certainly highlight what UC has to contribute, but come away feeling informed and that it was constructive. It may have been hard and challenging, but now we're going to go out and find solutions. And so the front door and the public square is what the center is all about. And I'm the new director. It's a brand new role that I'm looking forward to shaping.
And so how did this come about? Who was behind this and kind of putting it forward?
So I think the regents and President Drake were very excited about what more can the university do to fulfill not only an educational and research mission, but a public service mission where they want to be useful to policymakers and be practical and help them with the expertise they have, to not have a wall of independence that keeps the two from working together. And so this is an initiative that both the regents and President Drake have supported in the last several years. The center opened a year ago. It's quiet right now. I'm looking forward to making it noisy and very active, and a hub that people are like, I got to go to this program. I got to be there and be part of what's happening.
Because you're right. Having worked with, some UCs or some, like, they have so much knowledge and amazing abilities, and, especially on a lot of the scientific stuff.
Yep.
And it would be great if, kind of like something like LAO, like where a member could say, hey, like, this is what I'm thinking about doing,
Give me some research.
Yeah, what do you guys think?
What's the expertise in this area? It's even beyond that. And there are many partnerships we can have.
And you could have like this expert come and testify for you.
Exactly. Yeah. Not only in testifying, but providing their research and in a policy practical way. Don't just dump on them a research. Here's this great thesis I did at 100 pages, but distill it down to, here is a problem that Californians, your constituents, are facing that you care about. Here's data and research we have on potential solution, their pros and cons, what it would take to fund them. And here's how we can put it into practice. And being that service to the legislature is very important. I think a practical example I can give is when I was in the legislature, I was, as many were, interested in gun violence and good gun policy that was going to reduce gun violence. And I wanted to know not only the voices from the advocacy groups, because they do their own research, they fund their own institutes. I want to hear their voices, pros and cons, but where's data? Where's analysis that is less connected to one side or the other. And so Senator Lois Wolk and I founded through legislation the Gun Violence Research Center at UC Davis, that then in the years after when I served, they were able to come with reports on how did this policy that's been tried in other states work. Here's what didn't work and here's what did. How many people are affected by this enactment or regulation? So that you're getting all the voices from the advocacy groups, they're doing their job, but you're getting an additional research perspective that's not tied to other. And the research is excellent. They have to compete to be at UC. They have to compete to get the grants for it. It's peer reviewed, and they need to market it in a way that is going to get out there and useful. And that's what we help them with.
Yeah, because it's funny because a lot of these problems are complicated, right? It's not a black and white issue, and you got to look at many variables. And
well, you add another component. And that's the staff turnover in the building. People have their careers and they're changing their positions. They move on after someone's left office, or they leave to another office, or they go outside the building. And so a whole new crop of people are there learning an issue for the first time. And yes, they can rely on Third House and other advocates, but we want to be helpful to them as well. There will always be a need for educating on here's where the resources are to help you and your boss address the issues that you want to do, because that's constantly changing. The turnover in staff is just natural, and we want to help with that.
So will this work, I guess, both ways? Like members can go to you and seek
absolutely
input and research on bills or problems that you see over there?
Absolutely. Our goal with this center is to be that resource, and for legislators and policymakers and the entire community to know this is a place we can go for information that is useful to us and helpful for us solving problems. And we do that by programs and panels and events that we will have at the center, and also initiatives like having members of our UC faculty come and testify on different topics and making sure that the legislators know that's a resource we have for them. I absolutely want them to know there's a pin on the map. It includes UC Student and Policy Center, and we're a resource for them. That's part of that front door being open as well. And part of my job will be getting out of the building and making sure policymakers know about it, and that the events we have at the center are ones they want to come to that are not only highlighting UC research and expertise, but are just conversations they want to engage in.
Yeah.
And the students, I have to tell you, unlike so many other research institutes, we have students on 10 campuses, almost 170,000 students. Their voices can be connected with legislators. We can patch into those campuses. We can bring them here. It's a whole nother generation of Californians that can be on the panels and express their views on legislation affecting them. It's really hard sometimes for legislators to connect with other generations. We can do that.
Yeah. We kind of talked about, budget funding and how we're in a different budget time, but there's a lot of research, a lot of opportunity, a lot of exciting programs that, the state funds or should fund that, in the future could benefit the state or, save the state money. Are there any exciting things that you guys are looking at right now that, it's not really out there, but you've seen and you're excited about and,
Absolutely.
you'd like to see take off?
I can give you a long list. It's sort of, they say it's like sometimes when you start a new position, it's like drinking out of a fire hose. I'm directly with the fire hydrant coming right at me because the possibilities are so big. I'll give you a couple of examples just in the energy space. The national laboratories, which are partly managed by the University of California and have innovation in fusion technology, in carbon sequestration and carbon capture, in the advancing our electricity grid to be able to handle a zero emissions future goal that we have without having to deprive ourselves of energy and always having flex alerts. What kind of new batteries do we want to have? What geothermal and nuclear and other energy resources do we have available to us? We have very exciting innovation and research and concrete tests and policies that we can propose to the legislature on this. And I know they care about energy policy.
Right.
That's just one example that I'm very excited about. Certainly homelessness and housing is a significant one. In the fall, we have a speaker series on addiction, and both addiction with adolescents and addiction, opioids and other things that are out there that are causing such a stress in our communities, fentanyl and otherwise. That's been top of mind for the legislature for the last several years, but it's not going to go away until we solve that problem together. We have a great speaker series coming up in the fall on just that very issue. So those are some examples that I think are helpful to have.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Sounds pretty exciting. Sounds like you got a lot of work cut out for you. And I guess if listeners want to know more and kind of look into some of the stuff you're doing, what's the best way to kind of follow what the center's doing?
I'm going to give you my email, and I want to make sure that you get on our listserv. And the email is cabbaker@ucdavis.edu. If you have an idea of a program you'd like to see or a policy area you'd like to know more about, and can the UC help, please contact me. I don't mind my email getting flooded because I'd love to hear from you on that. And then go to the UC Center Sacramento website to find out what our upcoming events are. And you can also click on links to say, how do I find an expert on this topic, either for testifying or providing me with research. We're going to update websites and social media handles and otherwise, but that's the channel that we have right now. Please do that because we have great events and programs coming up, and I hope to see everybody there at the center.
That's awesome. You can find your own expert, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Sounds exciting, and looking forward to see what you're going to do at the center.
Thank you. I hope to see you there, and it's good to see you today.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.